Oh boy, I'm sitting on the floor again. You know what that means.
We're checking out a cab.
And today we are checking out what might be the world's most compact 2x12 vintage 30 loaded cab. It's made by a company called Cloudburst and it's made in the USA. Let's do it. All right guys, hope you're doing great out there today. If this is your first time here at my channel, my name is Kyle. What I do is I take all sorts of awesome high gain related guitar equipment, I knock things over and damage them, I record it with this simple SM57 setup, and I give you the unprocessed audio on your end. So if you're into East End and thrash riffs, dropsy hardcore riffs, and dudes that constantly knock things over and break them, you're in the right place. Consider hitting the like button and subscribing on the way out so you don't miss any more of my stuff. Thanks. All right guys, so today we are checking out something that I have a feeling a lot of you guys are gonna be interested in because it seems like the market for guitar amps, guitar cabs are just getting smaller and smaller. And no, I'm not talking about like the buyer pool, although that is definitely getting smaller and smaller too post-COVID. I'm actually talking about physical size. There are a massive assortment of really small, really compact tube amps on the market that didn't exist 10 years ago. And it really seems like a lot of guitars are trending towards carrying the least amount of physical gear possible. And honestly, it's getting easier than ever with the advent of modern technology, things like modelers with Class D power amps, as well as new tube technologies. So as far as guitar amplifiers go, things are getting smaller and more capable all the time. But when it comes to guitar cabinets, and by guitar cabinets, I mean speaker cabinets, things haven't really changed. There have been 112 cabs, there have been 212 cabs, and there have been 412 cabs pretty much since the advent of electric guitar. And nobody is really putting that much effort into making more compact versions of cabs that are on the market. It seems like the effort is mostly going into the speakers and the neodymium magnets that reduce a lot of the weight of the speakers, but the cabinets themselves, they're kind of just the same old that they've always been. So what Cloudburst aims to do with their 2x12 cabinet here is to not only shrink the size, but shrink the weight of a typical 2x12 cab way down, making it much easier to transport around for gigs or for practice, and basically giving you the best of both worlds where you get a 2x12 cab to finally go along with your super portable guitar amp. And with all that in mind, this cab that was sent to me in order to make this video is actually loaded with 2 vintage 30 speakers. So it doesn't have those neodymium magnet speakers, which do alter the tone drastically. It's got your bog standard vintage 30 in it, so you should know how that speaker should sound. So before we go too much further in this video, this is sort of a sponsored video. Cloudburst reached out to me. They asked me if I wanted to check out one of these cabinets and offered to send one over. I am not being paid for this video, but I did take the cabinet in exchange for making the video. And honestly, for me, this was really just kind of like a curiosity video. Cloudburst seem confident in the way that they build their cabinets and all the research and development that they've done over the years in order to try and get this cab to sound more like a real big 2x12 cab. And honestly, I wanted to check it out for myself and see how close they got. But also, I know a lot of you guys would be interested in a product like this. So that's essentially why I agreed to it. So feel free to take everything I have to say with a grain of salt. You're more than fair to do so, but just know I'm gonna give you my honest thoughts and opinions, as I always do. So real quick, let's talk about the construction of this cabinet, and then we are going to try a couple of guitar amps through it, and then we are going to basically just do a quick A/B test with the Mesa 2x12 that is sitting behind it, since that's pretty much the standard 2x12 cab. That is an oversized 2x12 cab. It's actually a little bigger than what is considered a standard 2x12 cab. So it'll be interesting to see how this really compact Cloudburst cab compares to that. So yeah, getting into the specs of the cabinet, I did forget to mention in the beginning of this video, Cloudburst is basically a one-man operation. It's one guy who makes all these, at least as far as I'm aware. So I think it's pretty commendable that he stuck so much time into basically trying to get the design right. But just so you know, there is a small level of customizability. Is that even a word? Hopefully. So onto the cabinet finally. This cabinet weighs 35 pounds, which is frankly pretty crazy. And that is basically through a careful selection of materials. It is made out of birch plywood, but the front panel or the front baffle is really, really thin compared to a regular guitar cabinet. It's 27 inches long by 14 inches high by 9 inches deep. So this thing is very shallow. It is very, very compact. Honestly, when it showed up in the box, I thought it was like a guitar amp. I didn't realize that it was the cab in the box. It is that small. But when you get that small with cabinets and speaker enclosures, there are a lot of drawbacks that come along with that, which is why you don't see a whole lot of super compact cabs on the market. The less internal volume of the cabinet you have, the more boxy, the more small and thin it's going to sound. And the way that Cloudburst kind of wanted to attack that issue is by putting basically strategically sized and placed portholes. I'm literally like fingering this thing right now, gross. All around the edges of the cab so that it can basically act as a port on, like, say, a subwoofer, where at certain frequencies it's going to push that air. It's going to create the effect of essentially there being larger internal volume in the cabinet. And I can say, for as small as this cab is, it does have more low-end response than I was expecting. But just like the size of the cab, there's gonna be drawbacks to the ports as well. You're gonna have to place it pretty strategically where you're playing in order to get the best bass response out of it. That's true for any guitar cabinet, but it's going to matter more with this cab because of the ports. But on top of that, each speaker kind of has its own internal chamber. There is a center divider in between these two speakers, and that center divider has portholes placed in it too. All of that is to basically just tune the cab to try to make it sound larger than it really is. So yeah, lots of interesting stuff going on with this cab. As you can see visually, it is very, very different. They did not want to go for the standard 2x12 look or the standard guitar cab look at all. This thing definitely stands out as soon as you look at it, for better or for worse. I'll let you be the judge of that. The only thing that I will critique is this front netting just looks super cheap. This is like, you know, like plastic fish netting. And I don't know if you can tell on camera, but it's kind of got some like little bit of waves in it. I would like to see maybe like a thin expanded metal here for me personally. That will alter the high-end response of the cabinet, but man, I'm not a fan of the way that this looks personally. I think it does look cheap, and I think that there could be a better option. Personally, I think you could probably just go with grill cloth and it would look better as well. But those are just my personal opinions according to my personal subjective taste. I do like these nice stained panels here on the front. The Tolex of choice for these cabs is going to be alligator skin. I'm going to assume that that is the builder of the cab's personal preference. You can get it in a few different colors. And then we've got a Cloudburst logo here. He puts a little leather strip that has basically been imprinted with whatever you want it to say. So mine says no leads, no cleans. And then on the top, he also puts a couple of leather strips over the corners so the corners don't get dinged up super easily. And finally, rounding out the construction, the handles, he puts a couple of rope handles that come from the inside of the cab. So those weigh next to nothing. They can be tucked away if you want them to, but they can also be pulled out in order to carry the cab around easily. And that pretty much rounds it out as far as the construction of this cab. So let's plug an amp to it and let's flog it with some belligerent riffs and see how it holds up. All right, guys, so to start out, we have the Cloudburst 212 hooked up. And for my guitar, I'm using my Epiphone Les Paul Standard with a Vineham Rampage Alnico 5. In the bridge, this is honestly a really good sounding guitar. So I'm just gonna go through a couple sound samples. You guys heard something at the beginning of the video. I actually just played that riff just now. And one of the things that stands out to me about this cab is how punchy and percussive the bass, the low end is. Now, that's not to say that there's a ton of low end, but because of the ports, you are literally moving air because the cones of the speakers are pushing air and sucking air in out of those ports. And it really is, if you're sitting right next to it, it's creating the illusion of a really punchy bass. So that's one thing that I really do like about the cab. I definitely feel it still has that boxy thing going on that you're gonna get out of smaller guitar cabinets. I mean, it's pretty much inevitable. It's definitely minimized due to the design of the cab. Like, I've played really small 1x12s and 2x12s before, and it opens up more than those, for sure. But just due to how extremely small this cab is, I mean, there's gonna be some of that mid boxiness. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, it's really around the 800 to 1200 range of the frequencies. Hertz is what they're called. I'm bad at my job. And those are the frequencies that are just gonna be accentuated by a small enclosure. It's just the laws of physics, science. So just to revisit that intro tone real quick. All right, so that was a thrashy high gain tone. Let's see if we can kind of dial it in for somewhat of a thicker drop D style tone and see if the cab kind of reacts okay to that. Alright, so that was a thicker drop D high gain tone. Again, low end seems very percussive. That definitely seems to be the selling point of this cab if you're gonna ask me. Nobody's asking me, but I'm gonna tell you. And even though I think the EVH is a good pair with this cabinet, I think that something more like the Blackstar Amp 3 is gonna pair even better because, I mean, we're talking about two extremely compact pieces of gear. Put these two together, you have an entire rig in just this amp and this cabinet, and you have an extremely portable, extremely loud rig. And honestly, something like this just seems a little bit more fitting, a little bit more realistic with this cab. So let's check that out real quick. And then finally, we'll compare the Cloudburst cab directly to a Mesa 2x12 rectifier cab. Alright, now I never do cleans, and that felt disgusting to me, but this man, small company, I want to make sure that I cover all the grounds on his product that he sent for me. And honestly, this cab seems to do really, really well with cleans, which is not much of a surprise because a lot of people like open back for airy cleans. Makes a lot of sense. Let's move over to a crunch tone real quick. What the hell did I just say? Alright, so yeah, man, I think that for this particular cabinet, crunch and clean is going to be where it's at. Obviously, for the really high gain, especially for the percussive stuff, the metal stuff, you're going to want something that's tight, that's focused, that's punchy. And even though this cab does have that percussive low end, the ports, you know, it just doesn't lend itself to that type of tone, especially if you're really particular. If you mess with it, I'm sure you can get it to work for you in some situations for sure. But man, clean and crunch actually sound really, really good on this cab. But that's enough of the weak loser stuff. Let's go for like a post-hardcore type of tone on the Super Crunch. right, guys, yeah, if you're asking me, this cab, great for anything that just is not that super tight, percussive, high gain stuff, because for that type of stuff that I just played, I think that sounded awesome. I think the clean sounded awesome. I thought the crunch sounded great. This really is a great sounding cab, and for anything that's not metal or hardcore, you're gonna be able to take this to a local gig and crank it up with something small like this and sound really, really good. Last but not least, let's check it out against the Mesa 212. I'm going to play the same riff with the same settings on the amp back to back so you guys can see the direct differences between this cabinet and a regular popular 2x12 cab, both loaded with V30s. Alright guys, that's gonna do it for me today on the Cloudburst Cabs 212 cabinet. What did you guys think about this thing? Is this something that you guys think the world kind of needs to explore more of? It'll just happen to my throat. Is the Cloudburst 2x12 cab something that you guys are interested in? Let me know down below in the cabinet. Let me know down below in the comments. Huge shout to Cloudburst Cabs for not only sending this out to me and for being willing to take my honest criticism, but also for putting the time and effort into a product like this. Not a lot of people are out there exploring the super compact 2x12 world, and to see somebody really dedicating the time, the effort, the research, and design to something like this, I think is extremely commendable, especially for a small company. So I only hope the best for Cloudburst Cabs in the future. I hope that they continue to work on the design. They have 112 cabs available. They've got the 212, and they also have a really weird but interesting looking 412 available. So I will link for that stuff down below in the description, in the comments of this video. Hope that you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that like button on the way out. Consider subscribing if you're not already subscribed. I'd love you to have what? Oh my god, I am falling apart so bad. Please come back. Hope you guys had fun. Thanks so much for watching. Kyle here again. We'll see you next time. Probably should have shut that off before all that. Stop! You know what this wall is missing? Another amp. There we go.